East Palo Alto, just 30 miles south of San Francisco, sits on the other side of the Bayshore Freeway from Stanford University and affluent Palo Alto. A racially mixed town of 20,000 people, it is a world apart from the rest of the peninsula.
The freeway has completely separated us from the other side. The last reporter that called me wanted to know if the relationship between East Palo Alto and Palo Alto had deteriorated. And my answer, it hasn't deteriorated because it hasn't existed.
Now, this is a typical crack house?
No, this is certainly not a typical crack house. This is next door to me, and I wouldn't allow a typical crack house to exist next door to me. We have problems with this house, of course, because people come in whenever they can and use it to smoke and mix their drugs.
Reverend Bob Hartley runs a recovery home for crack addicts next to this now abandoned house in East Palo Alto. Hartley organized the neighborhood to force the drug dealer who lived here out of town. But despite his efforts, the house is still a safe haven for users of crack cocaine.
And the druggies will certainly use buildings like this, you know, to get out of the weather and what have you. There might be someone in here. This is evidence of having smoked.
Crack is part of everyday life in East Palo Alto. Most people take it for granted. Bob Hartley can't. He opened his recovery house smack in the middle of the worst drug area in town. And even though he was beaten and shot at, he openly confronted the drug dealers.
Yeah, this was as late as last night. That looks like fresh matches. And this is how the cocaine is lit on the pipe. Twins, matches like that. This is evidence of, that's been there a while, but this is evidence of mix. Baking soda. You cut it, shake it up with baking soda, rock it up. This is evidence, all of the holes in the walls and what have you, is evidence of the frustration in using the drug. Tweaking, we call it. Sometimes you use the drug and you just, you know, you get over tweaked, overamped, and you just got to do something. All this kicking in is, and that could have just as well been someone's head.
But Bob Hartley isn't fighting crack alone anymore.
We have parents who's on drugs. How can you tell your kids something if you use it? You cannot tell your kids anything.
On New Year's Eve, gunmen riddled the East Palo Alto home of Mrs. C.W. Roddy with semi-automatic gunfire, wounding this 60-year-old anti-drug activist. The entire town reacted, and Mrs. Roddy came up fighting.
My new daughters I just got from the little children in San Jose. Hugs, not drugs.
Hugs, not drugs.
Jordis. Okay, Jordis.
Yeah,
Now that's what this community is about. That's why we're proud of East Palo Alto. These are two mothers that says, let's get together.
I had enough the first time I walked out there and told those children that I didn't want them selling drugs in front of my house. And I kept saying that for years. I didn't bring this thing on, they did. They decided that they were going to get rid of me. That's what brought this to a head. It wasn't me, it was the little pushers out there on the streets.
It is commonly believed the house was shot at in retaliation for Mrs. Roddy's vocal stance against drug dealing on her street.
First of all, the drugs are illegal, right? I am a law-abiding citizen. I pay taxes. And I feel that I have more of a right to demand the quality of life in which I want to live than they have to tell me or to dictate what kind of life I am to live because they want to sell their drugs and they're illegal.
The FBI launched a very public investigation into the shooting of Mrs. Roddy's home on Westminster Avenue. The Bureau called it an example of narco-terrorism. While nothing has surfaced publicly proving that assumption, Mrs. Roddy became a symbol of citizens standing up to drug dealers, a potential solution to the crack problem here and elsewhere.
Whoever shot at Mrs. Roddy made a mistake, and they picked C.W. Roddy. It's very simple. She made a big deal out of it. She's a lady who would not sit still for that sort of thing.
The press flocked to tell Mrs. Roddy's story, creating headlines nationwide. She was showered with honors and awards. Celebrities, including orator, nutritionist, and comedian Dick Gregory, heard of her plight and came to town to embrace her efforts.
Y'all can stop dope tonight in your neighborhood. All you got to do is just stand there and be willing to die. Malcolm died, Martin died. Just be willing to die. Not be nasty or go out with some guns. Just stand there and say, here I am. No longer are you going to run rampant through this neighborhood of mine. This is all I got.
It's a little like being in a third world country.
Trevor Burrows is an artist and environmentalist who has lived in East Palo Alto for 12 years. He is trying to preserve the friendly small-town flavor.
More relaxed. It's on a different set of value system from the rush and the jostle of mainstream society. It's very rural, and it's very agricultural.
East Palo Alto is an anomaly in the urban sprawl of Silicon Valley. Surrounded by wealthy towns like Atherton and Menlo Park, East Palo Alto is one of the poorest communities on the peninsula. 20,000 people live here, a mixture of blacks, Hispanics, and some whites and Pacific Islanders. It is a small town struggling with big city problems. Unemployment is rampant, approaching 30%. Nearly 70% of the area's teenagers drop out of high school, and street corners are crowded with young men hanging out. The budget is so small, the town can't afford enough police officers or provide recreation programs for kids. There are few businesses in town, mostly liquor stores and barbecue joints clustered in the Whiskey Gulch area next to the Palo Alto border. The Nairobi Mall, the one shopping center in town, closed nearly 2 decades ago. But for years it sat empty, a crumbling, boarded-up eyesore where drunks and drug addicts gathered to kill the day. The city finally knocked the shopping center down a year ago, leaving this empty lot in the middle of town, as empty as City Hall's bank account.
I think it's probably the most vulnerable town in San Mateo County.
San Mateo Supervisor Tom Nolan's district includes East Palo Alto.
I'm told that about 5% of the population at any given time is involved in the criminal justice system, which is an extraordinary number, a higher percentage than some of the major cities that are often associated with crime across the country.
A friend of mine visited once from New York, and they said that they were amazed. They've never seen anything like it in their life. They had gone from East Palo Alto on University Avenue through downtown Palo Alto to Stanford University. He said this is like going from the plantation to the headquarters or to the great house.
Elena Bex is the daughter of longtime East Palo Alto activist Ed Bex. As head of the local chapter of the Rainbow Coalition, she's convinced that East Palo Alto has been treated as a stepchild by San Mateo County.
Being a stepchild is perceived as someone taking care of you in a very minimal way, and yet you having no input at all. And that's basically kind of been the relationship, and to a certain extent, it is the relationship today.
So I think cities and counties are like people in that you can't begin to repair and rebuild yourself until you admit you've got a problem. And so there was some pride on their part, and in our case, there was probably what I would call what Senator Moynihan referred to once as almost benign neglect. People didn't want to think about it. So long as the problem was over there, there was a lot of neglect.
You see, the good part about the 50s, any problem we had, we could blame on white folks. Now, they didn't like it, but who cares? And we got to stop getting white folks' approval before we can blame them for something. Yes, you're right. I read. My son That boy reads so fast. He said, Dad, how come I read so fast? White folks, boy. Damn white folks. Dad, I just went through this book. In fact, white folks, boy. But you know, we can't blame white folks for nothing now. We are strong enough. We just don't have the unity.
All these kids right here, hey, y'all want some weed? Make it. They ain't gonna be no drug dealers. They're gonna be doctors and lawyers. Little Peter right here, he's gonna be a boxer one day.
Growing up here in East Palo Alto, I grew up in a home with drug addicts. You know, we used to have a lot of parties at my house. My dad was a heroin addict, and you know, I was involved with a lot of drugs since an early age. You know, from 10 years old, sniffing paint and sniffing gas, and going on to other things as marijuana. You know, coming to school, I couldn't keep up with my grades because I was, you know, my mind would always be somewhere else. And
Gilbert Jaimez, like 70% of his classmates, dropped out of high school. He felt neither academically nor socially prepared for the white, affluent high schools East Palo Alto teenagers attend in neighboring towns since the local high school was closed more than a decade ago. Gilbert was lucky. He changed his ways when he gave his life to God and kicked his crack addiction. He now is a campus aide at a local school, helping kids who have the same problems he did.
What I want to do here is just be their friends, just be somebody that, you know, I went through what a lot of these kids are going through. And they got good minds. But what it is they come to school and they see how messed up their schools are, and it kind of discourages them. So sometimes, they feel kind of bad.
We are just as good as any of the schools across 101.
Dr. Charlie Mae Knight is superintendent of the Ravenswood School District.
I feel that East Palo Alto, the Ravenswood School District, does an exceptional job with youngsters who come with a myriad of needs that society hasn't even attempted to address. Sometimes the only meal that they eat is when they come to the school. Society hasn't addressed that. Children who come to you where there is no authority in the house. You have children who are living in homes where crack are active of soul, where children are living in homes where parents care more about the pipe than they do about their own children. But on the other hand, somehow or another, as a school district, we have to not only empower those youngsters to cope with their own situation and at the same time say to them, but when you come to school, we want you to learn like everybody else.
East Palo Alto school kids score well below the average in standardized tests, but successful programs do exist.
And then stretch, breathe, and then stretch.
The school district has just opened a daycare center for babies born addicted to drugs and alcohol. The center helps the babies overcome their developmental disabilities, giving them a chance at coping when they enter school.
I'm cruising along in my nickel-plated micro cruiser. Where am I going to be sucked into your little green hole there?
Another successful program is a special school ordered into existence by the courts. The flood school requires students to perform at a high level just to stay enrolled. The academic atmosphere, state-of-the-art science and computer labs, and mandatory parent involvement in operating the school attract upwardly mobile parents who otherwise might send their kids to school outside of East Palo Alto.
The school district, in my opinion, does not have a curriculum that's tailored to meet the needs of the students in this city.
Sharifa Wilson is a teacher at Shule Mandela Academy, a private school. She thinks the majority of kids in East Palo Alto schools are being shortchanged, that her private school is a model the public schools should follow.
Pyramids. We have small classes. We have a maximum of 15 students per class so that we can identify the children's weaknesses and develop an individual program to meet those weaknesses. It is true that many of our students come from homes where they don't get any support in terms of homework or any kind of academic assistance. We have parents who will never go up to the school for open school. But the school district, where we differ, is that the school districts solution to the children not returning homework is not to give homework. Our solution is to create an after-school program where they can get the homework done. And that's what needs to happen in our school district.
When people say these youngsters just come in, put in time, that's not the case, because we have some excellent teachers here, but they are teaching under insurmountable odds. East Palo Alto and the Ravenswood School District are a microcosm of what is going to happen statewide and nationwide as the new pool of students that are coming into the public schools will be and are quantitatively different than any youngsters that we've had in the past.
But according to Gilbert Jaimez, the schools are losing the battle for the kids.
Like I said, when they're on the streets, they're walking home from school, they get out of school, they're back in East Palo Alto. They see the drug dealers driving around with Mercedes-Benz. They see all the nice gold that they have, and they see all that. It attracts them. They see the easy money they can make. Somebody will come up to them and say, hey, if you sell this, you can make a quick money. Why go to school, they think? You know, they go to school and get bored sometimes, and if they can just stay here and party, hang out with the buddies and drink and make money, you know, that's eventually, you know, it attracts a lot of our teenagers over here.
And my whole family dances.
Keeping kids off the streets and out of the drug culture is the biggest battle in East Palo Alto. The city and the schools can't afford to run cultural and recreation programs, so that task often falls to citizens like Matias Varela. Varela is the director of Raíces de Mexico, a Mexican folk dance group of 62 people. The dance group strives to build cultural pride in both kids and adults. Varela believes providing alternative activities like this is critical in combating the lure of the street.
Our basic philosophy is to encompass as many people as possible and to make the community aware that there is beautiful things out there besides drugs and the mentality of a taco truck type Mexican. Kids keep coming because they feel good about it. They feel good about themselves. I don't think there's one person in this dance group that that has any type of intent of ever being involved with the drug trade or anything like that. What we export and what we use is culture. And I think fighting those types of bad influences on kids, on ourselves and the community and stuff, I think that's the best way to do it, is through culture.
Role models. There's a black role model. There's a black role model. There's a black role model. All y'all are black role models. And that's all your children have to see is see you. Why they have to see Eddie Murphy? Okay. Why they have to be role models after somebody that can take a damn football and outrun Jesus on Saturday? That ain't role models. Why do we determine that somebody else going to determine who my role model is? How come it can't be my sister?
Pues fácil yo no creo que sea, ¿ves? Tener un negocio aquí en East Palo Alto. Por tanta droga, por tanta gente que anda en la calle.
Wilfrano Ruiz owns a bar and Mexican restaurant along University Avenue. His parking lot is a gathering ground for drug activity.
Sino todo el lugar es.
¿Cómo dónde?
Pues todo el lugar, como todo está baldío. Por eso toda la gente ahí se amontona.
¿Y qué hacen?
Bueno, ¿qué hacen? Pues yo pienso que venden ahí drogas.
¿Y qué hace la policía aquí en cuanto al problema?
Pues retirarlos, esculcarlos, llevárselos los que les agarran la droga. No, ahora está mejor. Ya parece que se va limpiando todo.
No city in America is handling the problem right now that crack cocaine has fostered on the United States. No city, including DC, Los Angeles, none of the cities. So we're just in the same ball game.
Police Chief Dan Nelson says complaints about shootings and open drug dealing on East Palo Alto streets have been going on for decades.
I pulled some newspaper clippings that came back from 1972, and essentially the same thing was being said at that time. The only difference, the drug has changed. At that time, it was heroin and marijuana. But this area, and you know, anytime an area gets a reputation, it kind of feeds on itself. It perpetuates itself.
The police department is heavily criticized for not clearing drug dealers off the streets. At the time Mrs. Roddy was shot, East Palo Alto could afford to field only 3 patrol cars at a time. Officers often handle 15 to 20 calls per shift, making it difficult to do follow-up investigations. Police detectives grapple with more violent crime per capita than in any other city on the peninsula. And they do this with fewer police officers than anywhere else comparable in the Bay Area.
If you look back 2 years ago, we had to lay off people. The police department took about 5 steps backwards from where we originally were. So if you look at that, combined with the explosion of crack cocaine, it happened about at the same time. And all of a sudden, it just went wild. There's no doubt about that.
East Palo Alto suffers from not having enough money. East Palo Alto was not a city at all until 1983, and many doubted whether a town with no industrial base could afford to incorporate and operate basic services. The jury is still out. In 1987, the town laid off 38 workers, including 12 police officers, reducing its payroll by more than 40%. Needed programs for recreation and alcohol and drug abuse were decimated, and housing and road improvement projects slashed.
This is a community that is struggling to get a hold of its own destiny.
Stan Hall is East Palo Alto's city manager. He contends the city must grow before more police officers or city programs can be added. His solution is an ambitious and controversial redevelopment plan aimed at doubling East Palo Alto's budget through taxes on new industry and at creating new jobs. Projected development ideas for large sections of the town include a hotel and convention center, a regional shopping center with a discount department store, movie theater, and car dealerships, and an electronics industry research and development plant. But so far, it's all a dream.
I think that what we have to do is not look at redevelopment as the panacea for the resolution of the problems of the community, but look at it as one of many different efforts that are being generated to bring the city into a sound physical and fiscal operation.
Opposition has already sprung up. Businesses and homes in the redevelopment areas would have to be moved, and it could be 5 years or more before the town's budget sees any new money. Opponents fear it is a step toward gentrification that will move poor residents out.
For every 3 jobs we develop, we'll be lucky if one of those jobs are East Palo Alto jobs. So just developing East Palo Alto does not guarantee the development of East Palo Alto jobs.
There's a fear of redevelopment in the sense that people automatically think about displacement. We can be creative in the types of programs that are here in this community. And so the redevelopment process should be tailored so that it can benefit the people that are living in this community. And that can be done through the redevelopment process.
Did you know he's a heavy load carrier? Did you know he's a heavy load carrier? Did you know he's never been late? Did you know he's never been late?
While the arguments rage over the future of the town, citizens are taking action. The crack problem won't be solved by a small police department and a struggling city government. People realize they must find the answers themselves by letting crack dealers and crack users know drugs won't be allowed anymore on East Palo Alto's streets. And if neighborhood rallies with gospel music and testimonials are what it takes to get the message out, that's what they'll do.
Thank and praise God for being delivered for 5 long years. I was a cocaine addict for a long time, and I was crazy. I lost my mind. I didn't have no sense of direction, no guidance in my life, but Jesus gave me another chance, and I'm going on with the Lord. So come on with me and go on with Jesus. Thank you, Lord.
Some of the drug dealers that's hanging around on the street, they seem to move.
when people come in and start talking about the Lord, and even the drug users, you know, they begin to kind of move down the block a ways, you know.
I just come out and do it myself. If I see them out here, I just tell them. I've had cars parked right here and walk down there, you know, to pick up drugs. And I just tell them, you can't, if you want to do business down there, you go down there and park your car down there. Don't park it in front of mine.
I had one lady call me the other night and said that there was a house close by her where they were selling drugs, and the lady was renting, and and the neighbors got together and asked her to move, and they felt good about it because they stood up and they made the lady move out, so the drugs aren't being sold and on their street anymore, and that's good.
After years of frustration, the perception in town today is that things are getting better.
But I sat here today to tell you that I can use my backyard. I have my grandchildren this morning was making a garden in the backyard. The 2-year-old and the 3-year-old was making a garden in the backyard, and 6 months ago I wouldn't have allowed that at all, because my yard was actually used as a thoroughfare where they'd be running back and forth from one street to the other. Either the drugstores would be running at each other, or the policemen would be running back and forth.
The San Mateo County Sheriff's Office now patrols part of East Palo Alto, increasing police presence. Crack dealing on the street has fallen off, and the crime rate has dropped in half, at least for now. But everyone worries this just might be a lull before a summer storm.
Whatever kind of services that's here now will have to continue. We really don't need another quick fix. That is that when all the pressure is off, then we go back business as usual.
For County Supervisor Tom Nolan, the key is East Palo Alto becoming more self-sufficient.
Because there's no way that the county can continue to provide out of our general fund reserves the kind of support we're suggesting. And in fact, that's not going to be enough anyway. East Palo Alto has simply got to make a go of it.
Fear and God don't occupy the same planet. Y'all got to organize this community. The whole world is waiting. There'll be the path here. The President of the United States got a drug czar, and they can't stop nothing because they don't understand love. You can.